Hey everyone. So today we're going to look beyond the big headlines at what the source material calls the world's secondary fires. These are the hidden conflicts that are quietly getting more and more intense all over the globe. We're going to dig into why these smaller, underreported wars might actually be a bigger threat than the major ones we see on the news every day. So let me ask you something. When you hear the words global crisis or major conflict, what's the first thing that pops into your head? It's probably the big headline-grabbing stuff, right? Exactly. You're probably thinking about things like a potential showdown between the US and Iran or a major disruption in a critical shipping route like the Strait of Hormuz. And look, those are the primary fires for sure. They're already putting a huge strain on energy markets and our global alliances. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the real danger, the greatest risk, isn't the main blaze that has everyone's attention, but all the smaller fires that are starting to burn in the background? Well, that's the core idea we're going to unpack today. All right, so to really get a handle on this threat, we first have to figure out where these sparks are even coming from. What exactly are these secondary fires? Well, this isn't just about one or two isolated problems. What the source material describes is a pattern, a sort of ring of fire with pressure points circling the globe. And each one is getting hotter, mostly without a lot of international attention. And this brings us to that key term, secondary fires. Basically, these are conflicts that are being fueled by local problems, local instability. But here's the kicker. They're at risk of just exploding into massive regional crises, especially when global security is stretched thin and looking the other way. And I mean, just look at the geographic spread here. It's huge. We're talking about an intense civil war in Sudan, widespread chaos across Africa's Sahel region, ethnic conflict in Myanmar, the constant tension between India and Pakistan, and a really deep political crisis in Venezuela. Each one of these is a potential spark. So what's lighting the match? Well, it's mostly internal stuff. We're seeing states that are literally collapsing, unable to provide even basic security for their people. You've got violent insurgencies that are gaining ground, and political systems that are just so fragile they could shatter at any moment. These are the sparks. But you know, a spark is one thing. A wildfire is something else entirely. So what's fanning these flames? Why are all these local sparks threatening to spread right now? And this is the crucial part. These conflicts are no longer staying contained. They're feeding into a much bigger, much more volatile global environment. You could say the global weather has changed, and that change is acting like wind on these flames. This slide really breaks down that shift. You know, in the past, you often had the great powers acting as a sort of containment force, managing these local crises to stop them from spreading. But today, those same powers are increasingly turning inward, focusing on their own problems. And that creates a dangerous power vacuum, basically a lack of global policing. Think about it this way. If there are fewer firefighters on call in a city, a small kitchen fire is way more likely to burn down the entire neighborhood, right? It's the same idea here. With global security thinning out, there's just less capacity, and frankly, less political will to put out these secondary fires before they get completely out of control. So this brings us to the most critical and honestly the most alarming part of this whole thing, the risk of these individual fires merging into a global inferno. What happens when they do? Well, the source material lays out a pretty clear pathway for how this could happen. First, without anyone stepping in, the local fires just get bigger and more violent. Then, that instability starts spilling across borders, and suddenly, separate fires start to fuse together, creating these massive regional crises. The final step? Eruption. That's when entire regions get destabilized, leading to widespread chaos. And the fallout from these explosions is just massive and totally interconnected. You get huge waves of instability that can create refugee crises. You get these power vacuums that become safe havens for terrorist groups. You see major disruptions to the supply chains we all depend on for goods and for energy. And all of this puts a huge amount of strain on already fragile international alliances. So when you add all this up, it's not just a series of individual crises anymore. It's actually pointing to something much bigger, a fundamental shift in how the world actually works. This quote from the source really nails it. This is all accelerating the shift toward a fragmented, multipolar world where local conflicts no longer stay local. In other words, problems that used to happen in one corner of the globe don't just stay there anymore. They create ripples that eventually affect everyone. Okay, so let's bring this all home. Why should this trend of secondary fires actually matter to you personally? Well, it matters because in our totally interconnected world, there's really no such thing as a truly local conflict anymore. When instability in the Sahel or a crisis in Venezuela disrupts global trade, we all feel the shockwaves. We feel it at the gas pump, we see it in the grocery store, and we feel it through the overall health of the global economy. And that leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling question to think about. In this new world of interconnected fires, with fewer and fewer global firefighters, the biggest danger isn't the fire we're all watching. It's the one that nobody sees coming. So the question is, where will the next spark fly?